A sensational global turning point. An urgent call from Ankara has turned into a loud ultimatum. Erdogan has struck at Putin. Turkey's new deadly drone with a Ukrainian engine. This could be the end of Putin's army. The Russians are already panicking. New UAVs are heading to the front. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan is hitting the Kremlin in its most sensitive spot. China has become Moscow's new enemy. Putin has been thrown out of Asia. More on all of this coming up. Watch until the end. Greetings. This is Ukraine Today. Renata Aslanova and the latest events. Urgent, the first details of the call to Erdogan have already become known. The Turkish leader has taken an unexpected step. In an emergency call, Erdogan demanded that Putin stop the bloody war and switch to diplomacy. Ankara has once again officially stated that Turkey is ready to take on a key role in peace negotiations on Ukraine. During the dialogue, the leaders also discussed bilateral relations and global threats. But most importantly, Erdogan made it clear that the patience of countries is running out. The president of Turkey also added that his country will continue to work in the interests of peace.
The president of Turkey stated that in order to achieve a just and lasting peace in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, it is necessary to intensify diplomatic efforts.
And the day before, it became known. The Turkish company Baykar has begun testing the third prototype of the Kızılelma drone, equipped with high-precision aviation weaponry and a new Ukrainian engine. The footage of the test was released by the company's press service. The reconnaissance and strike drone completed a flight carrying a 250-kilogram aerial bomb, which was equipped with an external correction system. According to the company, with the new, more powerful engine, the Kızılelma will approach the speed of sound, and thanks to aerodynamic improvements, it will be able to perform more complex maneuvers at higher speeds. In 2021, the Turkish company Baykar ordered jet engines from the Ukrainian state enterprise Ivchenko Progress to be installed on the drone. At the same time, engine deliveries continued into 2024. This is one of the most important projects of the Turkish defense industry, and it has already caused a serious wave of concern in Russia. Russian media are drawing attention to the fact that the aircraft is undergoing tests with a Ukrainian-made engine. They believe that if Turkey hands over the Kızılelma to Ukraine as a gesture of friendship, it would be the worst-case scenario for Russia. The Russian press notes that Turkish UAVs with Ukrainian engines highlight the military cooperation between Turkey and Ukraine. At the same time, Ukrainian media note that Ukrainian-made engines give the aircraft additional power, strengthening the friendship between the two countries. It was also mentioned that Baykar has decided to build a manufacturing plant in Ukraine, where in particular the Kızılelma and other drones could be produced for the Ukrainian army. Against this backdrop, it became known that Bayraktars have returned to the front. According to reports, Bayraktar drones, after a long pause, are once again being used in strike operations against Russian forces. Thus, medium-altitude, long-endurance drones struck a Russian boat and a unit on the Black Sea coast. And it's not just Turkey that is striking fear into the Russians, but Kazakhstan as well. Astana is stepping out of Russia's shadow and looking toward the west and Ukraine. Kazakhstan's customs has begun inspecting 99% of Russian vehicles transporting goods from China to Russia that could fall under sanctions. At the same time, the Russian Federal Customs Service states on its Telegram channel that the border is open. And they've sorted everything out.
We are currently in Uralsk, located in the border area, quite close to the Mashtakova customs post. We spoke directly with the various drivers and transporters. We are waiting for them in Russia. We also spoke with our colleagues from the Republic of Kazakhstan. We have a complete understanding of cooperation and everything is well coordinated.
But as they say, there are some nuances. Sanctions haven't been lifted, so many transporters fearing inspection return to parking lots to wait for a better moment.
Queues started to form in mid-September, mostly from vehicles carrying dual-use goods, suspicious items, or goods subject to sanctions. Electronics, drones, and parts for them. Clothing, goods from Western brands. Customs inspections for such goods occur in 99% of cases.
Cargo that is not subject to sanctions crosses the border in an average of 3 to 5 days, which is also longer than it used to be. According to media reports, about 7,500 trucks have accumulated at the Kazakhstan-Russia border.
There is a list of goods that are risky to transport through Kazakhstan. They will be turned back in 100% of cases. These include microchips and any kind of machinery.
Notably, media reports state that the Chinese side had already notified on September 18th that due to disagreements between the governments of Kazakhstan and Russia regarding the customs union agreement, entry and exit through the Kazakhstan-Russia border checkpoints have been temporarily suspended. It seems that such a situation has shifted the country's political direction away from Russia. And now in Russia, there is already a line forming. Some propagandists are suggesting to invade and carry out a sweep in Kazakhstan because of the drone attack on the Orsk oil refinery.
The Orsk oil refinery was attacked by drones. The distance from the Ukrainian border to Orsk is 1,400 kilometers. It is absolutely obvious that the drones were launched from the territory of Kazakhstan. Hence the question: isn't it time to carry out a raid on the territory of independent Kazakhstan in order to eliminate threats to Russia's national security? It would be best to immediately conduct a sweep in Astana.
A great rift in the Russian world. Kazakhstan is slipping out from under the Kremlin's influence. The empire is falling apart. Kazakhstan is yet another nail in the coffin of Putin's regime. Such a course is being pursued, seeking an alliance with Ukraine. All the details are coming up right now.
Ukrainian President Zelensky and Kazakh President Tokayev met in New York for the first time since 2019. On the sidelines of the General Assembly, Tokayev stated that it was time to sit down at the negotiating table, although he did not directly condemn Russia.
Kazakhstan remains concerned about the crisis around Ukraine, which continues to inflict serious harm on civilians, undermine global trust, and weaken international security. Nevertheless, bilateral and international diplomatic efforts to resolve this conflict should continue.
Kazakhstan appears to maintain neutrality regarding the Russia-Ukraine war and offers its mediation services.
From the outset, Kazakhstan offered its services as a possible mediator or as a venue for negotiations between the two opposing sides. This position has not changed.
But as they say, the devil is in the details, and there are many details in Kazakhstan's relations with Russia and Ukraine. For example, Kazakhstan refused to cooperate with Moscow on building a nuclear power plant. China will build it instead. Also, according to Kazakh authorities, they are preventing Russia from circumventing Western sanctions.
Well, we are taking measures to ensure that our territory is not used to bypass these sanctions. Various comprehensive measures are currently being taken, including the meticulous tracking of goods, sophisticated online tracking of goods, and even the creation of a specialized dedicated website where you can conveniently check whether a particular company or a specific product is indeed on the sanctions list. Trader Adart Okazet, I think that all of our exporters are fully aware of this important matter, and accordingly they diligently comply with it.
And the president has stated that he does not recognize the legitimacy of the so-called LNR and DNR.
And apparently this fundamental principle will be consistently applied to all state territories under consideration, which in our considered view unequivocally include the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, thereby encompassing their full geographical and administrative scope within this application.
Naturally, Russian politicians and propagandists cannot tolerate such audacity and regularly threaten Kazakhstan with war, claiming the same thing as they do about Ukraine, that these are supposedly originally Russian territories.
And if we don't resolve the issue with Ukraine, then we'll have problems with Kazakhstan, with Armenia, and with other countries that surround us.
With Kazakhstan? Well,
of course.
Why?
Well, just look at what's happening in Kazakhstan today in terms of, so to speak, building a certain Kazakh state. The way national mythology about independence is flourishing there, about the switch to the Latin alphabet. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there if you take a closer look.
The situation in Ukraine is clearly mirrored in Kazakhstan. There are also huge regions there populated by Russian speakers.
Some people in Kazakhstan believe that in the future we want to take northern Kazakhstan from them according to the so-called Ukrainian scenario. What do you think? Did we ever have such plans? Do we have any intention of doing that?
I believe that historically those lands are rightfully ours. This is an industrial region. These are cities built by our ancestors. So why did we give them away in '91? On what basis?
Because of this, Kazakhstan has created a list of Russian citizens who are banned from entering the country. This list includes about a dozen deputies of the Russian State Duma, as well as the notorious Tina Kandelaki, the ideologue of the Russian world Dugin, and the late husband of propagandist Simonyan. Kazakhs, brothers, what kind of ingratitude is this? Look at Ukraine.
Please look closely and observe carefully, and then think seriously and consider deeply about what you have seen. If you truly believe that you can continue to be so incredibly sly and cunning, and somehow manage to completely get away with all of your actions, then you are gravely mistaken.
President Zelensky has repeatedly stated, citing intelligence data, that Russia has military plans for Kazakhstan.
So the information we received was that among their priorities are the Baltic countries, Moldova and Kazakhstan. These are the closest targets of the Russian Federation.
The president of Kazakhstan stated that he would suppress any attempts at separatism, and Kazakh deputies went even further by making claims to territories that are part of Russia. We,
as responsible citizens, must oppose any manifestations of radicalism, extremism, and separatism. We must be delicate and at the same time firm. Ultimately, we must be fair.
Yes, we need to understand that even Novosibirsk is not Novosibirsk, it's Novy Sobir. These are our Kazakh territories. Tyumen is the southern edge of the Golden Horde, which means that even beyond Tyumen further north, those are also our territories. Orenburg, not Orenburg, but Omburg, and at one time it was the capital of the Kazakh state.
There was also a lot of different information from intelligence, for example, that Putin demanded Tokayev supply weapons for the war with Ukraine. And after Ukrainian drone attacks on oil refineries, he was begging Kazakhstan for gasoline. At the same time, Putin constantly humiliatingly mixes up Tokayev's first name and patronymic, and he probably does it on purpose. Everyone
knows that the president of Kazakhstan, Kamejemovich Tokayev, turned to the members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization for help. So Kamejemovich Emelyevich spoke, and, "Dear Kosim Jamaat Kemilyevich, it's good to see you again." So Kosim Jamaat Kemilyevich said that somewhere he has 27 billion.
Putin's plan was to draw Kazakhstan into the so-called Union State, following the example of Belarus, but he failed. Tokayev simply mocks such proposals.
The other day, the president of the Republic of Belarus, Alexander Ivanovich Koshenko, suggested that Kazakhstan join the Union State, but I appreciate the joke for what it is. I think there is no need for this, since there are other integration associations. First of all, the Eurasian Economic Union. As for nuclear weapons, we don't need them.
Even those who seem to be Russia's closest allies understand that it's impossible to trust terrorists and murderers, so they keep them at a distance and, whenever possible, support those who oppose them.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. Even China is becoming an enemy of Russia. Beijing has kicked Russia out of Central Asia and taken on the role of regional master. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are slipping out from under the Kremlin's influence, and Russian ambitions are collapsing before our eyes. Has China really become Putin's new adversary? Shocking details in the report.
China is Russia's main partner, helping it keep its economy afloat and wage war in Ukraine.
They shouted, "Bravo, well done, cheers, well done, hooray, hooray for China."
I am counting on maintaining very close and continuous contacts with President Vladimir Putin in various forms and through diverse channels for the sake of the dynamic and long-term development of the profoundly important Chinese-Russian relations. But I also anticipate further strengthening these essential ties.
Is that really the case? After all, at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia, and Chinese banks have stopped transactions with Russia due to sanctions.
Pairs, dozens, tens of millions of Chinese soldiers. That would be just what we need right now. But
why do you think so?
Why not?
So you really think soldiers should just die?
I look at the Belgorod region. I think about how much we truly lack the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
Very often we hear statements from China that China has never sold weapons to Russia and that China supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine and wants an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Just 3 years ago, propagandists were rejoicing, saying, "Let Western companies leave, we'll buy everything from China."
Now we've truly bought ourselves a truly wonderful Chinese car. It's amazing. Many, many times cheaper than the cars we used to buy before. I bought myself 3 pairs of Gucci shoes. 2,000 rubles each. Wonderful. Probably made somewhere in China as well. I hope here too. Fake, of course. As a matter of principle, I only buy fakes now.
What came of it doesn't even need to be commented on. And that so-called Chinese support for the Russian economy resulted in the bankruptcy of Russian manufacturers.
And just look at what, for example, the soldiers are driving. What, Russian-made cars? You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot, because it costs a fortune. It breaks down all the time. And the spare parts are insanely expensive. That's why the guys drive Chinese vehicles. And now they need motorcycles. Russian ones? Nowhere to be found. Somehow that's how it turns out, right? There are very few Russian ones.
And there are no Vossian ones at all.
What are we even talking about?
No, Vossian motorcycles don't exist. What, you didn't know that?
If you look at the Vossian Federation from an economic perspective, they're simply used as a basic sales market. That is, except for, let's say, the military industry. But as for civilian engineering, it's practically non-existent, multiplied by 0.
And Russia has literally turned into a raw materials appendage for China. By the way, the head of the foreign ministry, Lavrov, came up with a very apt metaphor calling Putin Xi Jinping's footstool.
The guests from the east, the guests follow the master's lead. So all the programs, of course, depend on the gracious proposals that the Chinese president and his team have made to our president. Basically, all China needs from an economic standpoint is cheap raw materials, which, by the way, Russia possesses in vast abundance. It's not just natural gas and crude oil, but also significant reserves of lithium, extensive timber forests, and a variety of quite valuable and strategic metals. And of course, gold as well. In other words, everything that China then uses to manufacture goods for the entire world.
Moreover, this situation manifests itself in a variety of ways. China has officially approved new geographic maps on which part of Russia's territory, the Bolshoi-Ussuriysky Island, is recognized as Chinese territory. In fact, the Chinese have already settled vast areas of Siberia and turned the territory into their own colonies.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay within its borders simply because it actually has, by the way, certain historical claims to a significant part of our Far East. And that's a fact.
Of course, at first there was enthusiasm, but it gradually faded, and eventually we all realized that Asena had become a Chinese colony. It's simply a slave-owning enterprise. A slave-owning enterprise or a prison, call it what you will, where overseers are put in place to keep the workers here under control. Because there is still outrage, and workers in Asena have protested with the slogan, "Asena is not China." And they also regularly threaten, saying that you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this city. Here's your black mark. So just sit quietly for your 15 to 30,000 and keep your mouth shut.
They are very good at waiting. And this ability to wait, this is also about the integration of the Chinese on the territory of the Russian Federation. And in fact, this is essentially already annexation, and moreover, if you pay attention to some Chinese maps, certain regions of the Russian Federation are already labeled with Chinese names. Well, listen, why would you even need to declare war for that? According to...
Russian television is already showing segments about how to find a Chinese husband, and in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese is being actively studied.
It's divided into two camps, those who want to study it and those who are skeptical and say, why do we need Chinese? We're not planning to go anywhere. I answer very simply, actually, I tell them, I'm not really teaching you Chinese here, but rather, I'm using the Chinese language to make you think for yourselves. And that's a skill that will always come in handy.
Putin constantly tries to characterize relations with China as a strong friendship, but Xi Jinping of China literally spat in Putin's face by taking away from Russia that very great victory.
And just yesterday, my friend and representative of the PRC treated me to this kind of Peking duck.
I'll be honest with you, there were 2 pieces there, and I thought I'd only eat 1.
You know what I mean, right? But I couldn't resist, I ate the second one too. You see, it was just too delicious.
China and Russia, as the main theaters of military operations during World War II, made a decisive contribution to the victory over fascism and thus laid the cornerstone for the post-war world order.
China and Russia are neither friends nor partners. And here it's important. As soon as China has enough motivation to limit its cooperation with the Russian Federation, believe me, it will do so. Russia, in fact, has no other choice. Either befriend China now or face economic and consequently political, military, and all other kinds of collapse at the same time.
It turns out that China is not helping Russia save its economy or win the war at all, but is simply taking advantage of its weakness to take its resources and strengthen its influence in Asia.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your doubts in the comments. Like the video to stay up to date on the main news. There's more to come.